Ruth Caldwell, a retired teacher, transforms a McDonald's corner into a classroom for disadvantaged children in Edgewater, Texas. Despite complaints from customers and corporate pressure, she persists, helping kids like Jamal and Lucia excel academically. Her dedication draws both admiration and scorn, with some townsfolk mocking her efforts online. A mysterious stranger, revealed as billionaire Samuel King, observes her work, hinting at a life-changing intervention. As Ruth faces eviction from McDonald's, the story teases a dramatic shift. Will her quiet mission survive, or will opposition prevail? Stay tuned to uncover the miracle that reshapes Edgewater. Inspired by Ruth Caldwell's story? Subscribe to my channel for more tales of unsung heroes making a difference. Your support helps us share stories that inspire kindness and change. Hit that subscribe button, join our community. Let's celebrate those who light the way for others. The sharp sting of the customer's words cut through the hum of the McDonald's dining area, landing like a slap across Ruth Caldwell's weathered face. "This is not a place for teaching poor kids," the man bellowed, his voice thick with indignation. Ruth, a 68-year-old retired teacher, felt her heart lurch, but she didn't look up. Her hands, trembling slightly from age and the weight of the moment, continued to guide the pencil of a young boy with a torn sleeve, helping him trace the lines of a fraction problem. She bowed her head, not in defeat, but in quiet resolve, her silver hair catching the soft glow of the afternoon sun streaming through the restaurant's wide windows. The warmth of that light felt like a small comfort, a reminder of why she was here. Day after day, with her worn textbooks and her small cup of coffee, the only indulgence her meager pension allowed. For 43 years, Ruth had poured her soul into teaching at Edgewater Elementary, a modest school in a small Texas town battered by time and circumstance. Now, living alone in a cramped apartment just 3 blocks from this McDonald's, she had carved out a new purpose in the unlikeliest of places. Each afternoon, she carried her tattered books to the restaurant, drawn not just by the air conditioning or the familiarity of the space, but by a deeper calling. Edgewater had been hit hard by the post-pandemic years, with nearly a third of its families scraping by below the poverty line. The schools, disrupted and underfunded, had left children like Marcus, a wiry 10-year-old with bright eyes and a math worksheet smudged with eraser marks, struggling to keep up. Ruth saw them congregating at McDonald's, not for the food, which most couldn't afford beyond a rare ice cream cone, but for the free Wi-Fi that tethered them to a world of learning they couldn't access at home. It had started with Marcus. One afternoon, his small voice broke through Ruth's quiet routine as she sipped her coffee. "Miss, could you help me with this?" he asked, holding out his crumpled worksheet. Ruth's heart stirred with a mix of hesitation and instinct. She slid closer, her eyes scanning the page. "Of course, dear," she said softly. "Let's see what we're working with." That moment, so simple yet so profound, sparked a quiet revolution. The next day, Marcus returned with his cousin, a shy girl clutching a dog-eared notebook. By the end of the week, a small cluster of children had formed around Ruth's table, their eyes alight with hope and curiosity. Within a month, 10 to 12 kids gathered daily, their backpacks stuffed with homework, their hearts brimming with a trust that Ruth felt both honored and burdened to carry. Not everyone saw the beauty in this makeshift classroom. The McDonald's, once a haven of predictable routines, began to hum with discontent. Regulars like Mrs. Gaines, who ordered her chicken sandwich with the same precision every day, muttered under their breath about the noise. "I come here for peace, not to listen to a bunch of kids," she grumbled, her voice carrying just enough to make the children glance up nervously. Another patron, a man in a pressed shirt, scoffed loudly. "This place is turning into a daycare. What's next? Story time at the drive-thru?" Ruth felt the weight of their disapproval, but she kept her focus on the children, her voice steady as she explained multiplication or corrected a misspelled word. The tension came to a head one afternoon when Jamal, a quiet boy from the trailer park, knocked over his water cup in a burst of excitement over solving an equation. The spill spread across the table, and before Ruth could grab napkins, a well-dressed businessman slammed his hand down on his own table, his face red with frustration. "That's it," he shouted, his words slicing through the air. "This is not a place for teaching poor kids. Some of us raised trying to eat in peace. Ruth flinched, the harshness of his tone piercing her heart. She wanted to respond, to defend the children who had nowhere else to turn, but she swallowed Iria's quiet triumph when he solved a problem, of the way the children's faces lit up when they understood something new. In that moment, Ruth felt a flicker of purpose reignite within her, a belief that her most meaningful work might be unfolding now, in the unlikeliest of places, with the children society had all but forgotten. In the stillness of her modest apartment, Ruth Caldwell whispered to herself, her voice soft as a prayer, "The ones who give the most often bear the heaviest cost." The words lingered in the air, mingling with the hum of her old refrigerator. Her heart carried a quiet ache, tempered by years of teaching that had taught her sacrifice was often the shadow of purpose. Yet as she gathered her worn notebooks and pencils each day, a spark of hope flickered within her, a certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. 3 months into her makeshift tutoring sessions at the local McDonald's, Ruth began to see miracles unfold among the children who gathered around her table. These were kids from the town's rougher corners, their lives shaped by hardship, yet their eyes burned with untapped potential. One afternoon, Jamal, a lanky 12-year-old who had once barely spoken, sat hunched over a worksheet, his pencil moving with purpose. When he first arrived, his words were scarce, his gaze fixed on the floor as if afraid to be seen. Now he unraveled a complex algebra problem with a confidence that made Ruth pause, her own mind racing to keep up. "Jamal," she said, her voice warm with admiration, "where did you learn to think like that?" He shrugged, a shy grin breaking through. "You showed me how to break it down last week, Mrs. Caldwell. I just kept at it at home." His quiet pride warmed her heart, and she felt a surge of joy. Here was a boy discovering his own strength, a spark that could one day blaze into something extraordinary. A week later, Jamal arrived with a note from his math teacher. The paper creased from his tight grip. "Mrs. Caldwell, whatever you're doing with Jamal, please keep going," it read. "He's qualified for the state mathematics competition. Our school's first in 7 years." Ruth's eyes misted as she read the words, her heart swelling with pride. She looked at Jamal, standing a little taller, and saw not just a student, but a future unfolding, bright and boundless. Then there was Lucia, a timid 10-year-old from a Mexican immigrant family, for whom English was a labyrinth of unfamiliar sounds. Ruth remembered the early days when Lucia's hands would twist nervously, her voice barely audible as she stumbled over words. With patience, Ruth guided her through picture books, each page a step toward confidence. 6 weeks later, Lucia approached with a crumpled piece of paper, her face glowing with a smile that seemed to light up the room. She had won the town's essay contest with a poignant story about her grandmother's journey to America, a tale of resilience that had once been locked inside her. "You did this, Lassie," Ruth said, her voice thick with emotion as she clasped the girl's hand. "I just helped you find the words that were always there." Lassia's radiant smile stayed with Ruth, a beacon of why she kept going. As news of the children's achievements spread, more kids joined the sessions, their chatter and laughter filling the McDonald's. Ruth's table grew crowded, but she never turned anyone away. She'd pull up another chair, her smile steady, and make space for one more. To Greg, the manager who watched with quiet amazement, she said, "They're all gems, Greg. Some just need the dust brushed off to shine." Her words were gentle but resolute, rooted in her unshakable belief in every child's potential. Not everyone shared her vision. Parents from the town's affluent neighborhoods, insulated by wealth, bristled at the sight of children from less desirable areas filling the restaurant. They sent a formal complaint to McDonald's corporate office, their words sharp and cold, written on expensive stationery. "This establishment has become a gathering place for unsupervised children, ruining the atmosphere for professional clientele," they declared, their signatures, 12 in all, a testament to their disdain. Ruth read the letter in silence when Greg shared it, her fingers tracing the paper's edges, her heart heavy with the sting of their judgment. The hostility spilled online. Someone filmed Ruth tutoring, her gray hair tucked behind her ears as she leaned over a child's work, her voice patient and kind. The video was posted with a mocking caption, "Retired teacher works for free because she's got nothing left to lose." Comments poured in, a mix of pity and cruelty. some calling her unstable, others accusing her of seeking attention. Each word was a small wound, but Ruth held fast to the faces of her students, Jamal's quiet triumph, Lassia's glowing pride, and refused to let the noise dim her purpose. The rejection crept into her daily life. At Parker Stationery, where she went to buy supplies, the owner's face tightened. "Sorry, Mrs. Caldwell. We're out of notebooks and pencils," he said, his eyes avoiding hers. Behind the counter, stacks of supplies sat in plain view, a silent dismissal. Old friends turned away too. Barbara Williams, who had shared laughter and lesson plans with Ruth for 15 years, now crossed the street to avoid her. At church, where Ruth had once been welcomed warmly, pews filled with purses and jackets when she approached, as if her presence was an intrusion. The isolation settled like a weight in her chest, but she carried on, her resolve unbroken. Marta, the church secretary, remained a rare ally. "They're afraid," she told Ruth one Sunday, her voice soft but firm. "Your kindness shows up there in action, and they don't know how to face it." The words were a balm, but the loneliness lingered. One rainy Tuesday, as the children worked diligently around her table, Ruth noticed a stranger in the corner. He was in his 40s, his baseball cap pulled low, his presence quiet but deliberate. For 3 hours he sat there, occasionally typing on his phone, but mostly watching the session with a steady gaze. As the afternoon ended, he approached, placing a folded note beside Ruth's coffee. "We owe you a great debt," it read. "Someone will be back." The cryptic message stirred a mix of curiosity and unease, but Ruth tucked it into her Bible, her mind quickly returning to the children. Days later, Greg called her aside, his face heavy with worry. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice tight, "I've been summoned to a regional meeting. Corporate issued a warning. If these sessions continue, I'll have to ask you to leave, for good." The words struck like a thunderclap, each one heavy with finality. Ruth nodded slowly, her heart sinking under the weight of the choice ahead. She looked at the children, their heads bent over their work, their futures bright with promise, and felt a fire kindling within her. This was her path, and she would walk it, no matter the cost. That evening, Ruth Caldwell sat alone at her modest kitchen table, her hands trembling with a mix of resolve and quiet fear as she prepared for an uncertain future. She carefully packed extra worksheets for her students, her neat, flowing script marking each child's name with deliberate care. Every stroke of her pen felt like a promise, a tether to the children who depended on her. "If I'm not here tomorrow," she murmured to herself, "they'll need these to keep going." Her heart ached with the weight of what might come, a quiet dread that her time teaching in the corner of McDonald's might be ending. As her students left that evening, their footsteps echoing in the bustling restaurant, she called out, her voice steady despite the turmoil within, "Don't forget to read Chapter 3 on your own. Stay on track now." Her words were both instruction and plea, a desperate hope that they'd hold fast to their learning, even if she couldn't be there to guide them. Jamal stayed behind after the others had gone, his young face hardened with a fierce loyalty that made Ruth's chest tighten. "They can't make you stop teaching us, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice sharp with defiance, his eyes burning with the injustice of it all. "It's not fair." Ruth felt a surge of pride for his passion, but also a pang of sorrow. She knew the world's unfairness all too well. She reached out, her hand, worn from years of grading papers and holding books, gently patting his. "Life doesn't always play fair, Jamal," she said, her voice soft but resolute, her eyes locking with his to offer reassurance she barely felt herself. "What matters is how we stand up to it. We keep pushing forward, no matter what." She meant to comfort him, but the words were also a lifeline for her own faltering spirit, a reminder to hold fast against the storm she sensed was coming. The next morning, Ruth arrived at the McDonald's, her old book bag slung over her shoulder, its frayed straps a testament to years of service. Her steps were deliberate, but each one felt heavier than the last. When she saw the sign on her usual table, "Study area closed," her heart sank, the words cutting like a blade. Greg, the manager, stood nearby, his gaze fixed on the floor, as if the corporate notice in his hand was too heavy to bear. He gestured toward it, a weak attempt to explain the unexplainable. Ruth's breath caught, but she squared her shoulders, gathering her dignity like a shield. She turned and walked out, the stares of curious customers trailing her like shadows. Outside, a small group of her students waited, their faces a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Lucia, clutching her English homework tightly, looked up at her with red-beige searching eyes. "What now, Mrs. Caldwell?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the unknown. Ruth opened her mouth, but no answer came. For the first time in her 3 decades of teaching, she was at a loss, and the silence felt like a betrayal of everything she stood for. Gossip spread like wildfire through the town. At the local salon, the owner snipped at a client's hair, her voice sharp with judgment. "They finally got rid of that makeshift classroom at McDonald's," she said, her tone laced with disdain. "It's a business, not a charity case." Across the room, another woman shook her head, her voice softer but firm. "Those poor kids. Who's going to help them now?" The salon owner scoffed, brushing off the concern with a wave of her hand. "Their parents should be doing that. That's how it's supposed to work." The words echoed the harsh reality Ruth faced, each one a reminder of the fragility of her mission. She had always believed that small acts, teaching a child to read, helping them solve a math problem, could change the trajectory of a life. But now, as she moved through the town, that belief felt like a fragile thread, stretched thin by doubt and circumstance. For 3 long weeks, the corner table at McDonald's remained empty, a silent void where Ruth's lessons had once thrived. She tried to keep teaching, moving her classes to the public library, but the rigid hours and strict silence rules stifled her ability to connect with her students. She attempted the park next, hoping open air might offer freedom, but April's relentless rain and biting mosquitoes put an end to that dream. Her small apartment, filled with stacks of books and faded photographs, could barely accommodate 2 students at a time, let alone the dozen who needed her. Some students stopped coming altogether, their absence a sharp pain in Ruth's heart. Others sought her out, finding her in the grocery store aisles, at the laundromat, or waiting at the bus stop, their homework clutched tightly in hopeful hands. "I'm sorry," she'd say, her voice breaking with each apology. "I'm still looking for a place." Inside, the weight of failure pressed down, suffocating her spirit. For the first time since her husband's death 12 years earlier, Ruth felt unmoored, questioning whether she had anything left to give. Her arthritis flared, a constant ache that mirrored her inner turmoil, and she began sleeping later each morning, the purpose that had driven her for decades slipping away. On a gray, rainy Thursday, as the world outside her window seemed to mirror her mood, a knock at her apartment door startled her. She opened it to find Greg, the McDonald's manager, standing awkwardly in the hallway, his face a mix of unease and something she couldn't quite place. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice low but urgent, "I need you to come to the restaurant tomorrow at 10. It's important." Ruth's heart flickered with a spark of hope, though exhaustion tempered it. "Greg, if this is about my reading glasses, I can—" she started, but he cut her off, his tone firm yet kind. "Just be there at 10. Please." He turned and left before she could ask more, leaving her standing in the doorway, her mind swirling with questions and cautious optimism. The next morning, Ruth dressed with care, slipping into her navy blue dress reserved for church and rare special occasions. She smoothed the fabric, her hands trembling not from pain but from a nervous anticipation. Perhaps the corporate office had reconsidered, she thought. Perhaps they'd allow her to resume her teaching, even with restrictions. As she approached the McDonald's, she noticed the parking lot was unusually full, the Golden Arches sign displaying an unexpected message: closed for private event. Her steps slowed, doubt creeping in. Had she misunderstood Greg's request? But before she could retreat, the door swung open, and Greg ushered her inside, his eyes bright with an unfamiliar excitement. Inside, Ruth stopped dead, her breath catching in her throat. The restaurant had been transformed. The familiar tables were rearranged, a small podium stood at the center, and every seat was filled, not with the usual customers, but with her students and their families. Their faces lit up as they saw her, a wave of smiles and whispers filling the air with warmth. Before she could make sense of it, a commotion outside pulled her attention. Through the window, she saw 3 black SUVs with tinted windows roll into the parking lot, followed by news vans. A small helicopter landed in the adjacent park, its rotors kicking up clouds of dust that swirled across the asphalt. "What in heaven's name?" Ruth whispered, her heart pounding with a mix of awe and confusion. The restaurant door opened again, and a tall man in a pristine suit stepped inside, his presence commanding the room's attention. In the heart of a busy McDonald's, where the hum of conversation and the clatter of trays filled the air, a man entered, flanked by a small entourage. Ruth, seated at her usual corner table with her students, felt her breath catch as she recognized him. Samuel King, the 38-year-old CEO of Horizon Technologies, a titan whose face graced newsstands and television screens worldwide. His arrival silenced the room, every head turning as his sharp eyes scanned the space before locking onto Ruth. For a man known for his unshakable poise, the vulnerability in his expression was startling. His eyes glistened, holding back a flood of emotion. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice low but clear, carrying a tremor that betrayed his polished exterior. "You don't remember me, do you?" Ruth's face creased with confusion, her mind racing to place him. She studied his features, searching for a clue, but found none. Samuel's shoulders sagged slightly, as if bracing himself for a memory too heavy to carry alone. "2 years ago," he continued, "you volunteered at the Edgewater Community Center after school. There was a boy there, homeless, living in a shelter with his mother after they fled a home filled with violence. That boy couldn't read, was failing every subject, and had been written off by nearly everyone." Ruth's eyes widened, a spark of recognition igniting. "Sammy," she whispered, her voice fragile, as if afraid the memory might dissolve. "Little Sammy with the broken glasses." Samuel nodded and a tear escaped, carving a path down his cheek. The restaurant seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, bound by a shared past. "You stayed with me every day," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. 2 hours after your teaching job, you sat with me. You brought books from your own home, tattered novels and math workbooks. You taught me to solve equations on napkins because we couldn't afford paper." He stepped closer, his hand shaking as he reached for hers. Ruth's fingers, calloused from years of work, met his, and the touch felt like a lifeline across time. "The algorithm that launched my first company, the one that grew into Horizon Technologies, was born from a game you taught me," he said, his voice steadier now. "You used dominoes to show me how to recognize patterns, and that lesson became the foundation of everything I've built." And the crowd watched, spellbound, as Samuel's words wove a story of a boy who had been invisible, yet seen by one woman who refused to turn away. "Last month," he went on, "my mother sent me a video that had gone viral. It showed an elderly teacher being mocked for tutoring kids at a McDonald's. I watched it, and my heart knew it was you before I even saw your face clearly. I flew from San Francisco that night, sat in this restaurant for 3 hours, and watched you work. You were still pouring yourself into these kids, just like you did for me." Turning to the gathered crowd, Samuel's voice grew firm, resonant with purpose. "Everything I am, everything I've achieved, began with this woman who never gave up on a child the world had discarded." His assistant stepped forward, presenting a polished leather portfolio. "Mrs. Caldwell," Samuel said, his tone warm yet formal, "I've established the Ruth Caldwell Educational Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million. It will provide full scholarships for every child you've ever tutored, not just through college, but through graduate school if they choose that path." The room filled with gasps, parents clutching their children as tears flowed freely. Samuel continued, undeterred. "We're also building a state-of-the-art learning center in Edgewater, with your name on the door. You'll have a permanent role there in whatever capacity you wish to serve." Ruth swayed, the weight of his words nearly overwhelming her. Jamal, one of her young students, rushed to her side, his face glowing with pride as he steadied her. "One more thing," Samuel said, nodding toward Greg, a McDonald's representative. "The McDonald's Corporation has agreed to designate April 23rd as Ruth Caldwell Day across all Texas locations. This restaurant will feature a permanent study area for students with free Wi-Fi, supplies, and snacks." Applause thundered through the room, a wave of joy and disbelief. Outside, Ruth glimpsed a growing crowd through the windows, neighbors, townsfolk, and news crews drawn by the commotion. Among them stood figures from her past, the businessmen who had berated her for cluttering the restaurant, the parents who had signed a petition against her tutoring, the stationery store owner who had turned her away. They hovered at the edges, their faces a mix of guilt and wonder, witnessing a moment they hadn't anticipated. As the excitement settled, reporters pressed forward, clamoring for interviews. Ruth, with quiet resolve, waved them off. Instead, she drew her students into a circle, her voice soft but unwavering. "I never needed the world to see me," she told them, her eyes brimming with love. "I only needed you to see yourselves. Grow up, carry this kindness forward. That will be my true legacy." Samuel watched, a quiet smile softening his features. In Ruth, he saw the same woman who had changed his life all those years ago, untouched by time or circumstance. Her reward had never been fame or fortune. It was the future she shaped, the heart she lifted, and the legacy she built, one child at a time. In the quiet moments after the ceremony, as the crowd thinned and the echoes of applause faded, Ruth Caldwell stood alone with Samuel King, her former student turned benefactor. The air was thick with the weight of what had just transpired. A community transformed, a legacy cemented. Samuel, now a man of influence with the world at his fingertips, looked at Ruth with a mix of admiration and disbelief. "You could have anything now," he said, his voice steady but warm, carrying the conviction of someone who had seen her work miracles. "Any job, any opportunity, name it, and I'll make it happen." Ruth's eyes crinkled at the corners, her smile deepening the lines etched by decades of laughter and quiet perseverance. She tilted her head, her gray hair catching the soft glow of the evening light. "Samuel," she said softly, her voice a gentle melody of resolve, "I already have the only job I've ever wanted. Teaching children they are enough, that they matter. That's my calling." Her words hung between them, simple yet profound, a testament to a life devoted not to personal gain, but to the quiet, transformative act of nurturing young minds. A year after the remarkable events that had unfolded at the McDonald's on Main Street, the Ruth Caldwell Learning Center opened its doors in what had once been a forgotten department store in the heart of Edgewater. The building, now reborn, stood as a beacon of possibility. Its sleek, modern interior buzzed with the hum of new computers, their screens casting a soft glow across rooms filled with promise. A library, brimming with thousands of books, invited readers to lose themselves in stories and knowledge. Classrooms, thoughtfully designed, blended traditional learning spaces with innovative setups that encouraged creativity and collaboration. For Ruth, the center was more than a building. It was a dream made tangible, a place where every child could find a spark to ignite their future. Yet, despite the grandeur of the new facility, Ruth's life remained unchanged in its simplicity. She still lived in the same modest apartment, though Samuel had quietly ensured its building was renovated, its walls freshly painted, its plumbing modernized, and her rent paid for life, a secret she accepted with a knowing smile but never mentioned. Her worn book bag, a faithful companion through decades of teaching, still hung from her shoulder. Professionally mended now, it bore the same eclectic collection of patches and pins, each a tiny relic of her journey, a badge of her unwavering commitment. Every morning she greeted each child with the same warm, enveloping smile that had become her signature, a gesture that felt like a promise. You are seen. You are valued. The Learning Center quickly became more than a place of education. It wove itself into the fabric of Edgewater, becoming the beating heart of the community. Parents who had never finished high school found themselves drawn to the GED classes offered in the evenings, their eyes alight with the possibility of second chances. Senior citizens, eager to share their wisdom, led workshops on practical skills, cooking hearty meals, fixing leaky faucets, or patching drywall, passing down knowledge that strengthened the community's roots. The computer lab, open until midnight, hummed with activity as residents of all ages explored technology that had once seemed out of reach. At the center's entrance, a framed, yellowed handkerchief hung under glass, its delicate embroidery reading, "To teach is to touch a life forever." It was the same handkerchief Ruth had used for years to wipe chalk dust from blackboards and, on occasion, to dry the tears of a struggling student. To those who passed by, it was more than an artifact. It was a symbol of her quiet, enduring impact. The McDonald's, where it all began, remained a cornerstone of the community's transformation. The Ruth Caldwell corner, with its 4 tables permanently reserved for students, was a sacred space. Greg, the manager, took pride in overseeing a program that provided free meals to children who studied there. His chest swelling with purpose each time he saw a young face bent over a textbook, a burger, and fries at their side. Even Mrs. Gaines, who had once grumbled about the noise of children laughing and learning, now volunteered twice a week. Her stern demeanor softened as she guided young readers through the rhythm of words. Her own heart, once guarded, had been touched by Ruth's vision, and she found joy in the small victories of each child she helped. At a community celebration, Lucia, now 15 and radiating confidence, stood at a podium where she had once been too shy to speak above a whisper. College recruitment letters already filled her mailbox, a testament to her potential. Mrs. Caldwell didn't just teach us math or reading, she said, her voice clear and strong, her eyes scanning the crowd with gratitude. She taught us to believe we deserved an education, that our beginnings don't dictate our destinations. She showed us that we could dream bigger than we ever thought possible. Beside her, Jamal, now preparing for a state mathematics competition, nodded in agreement. His quiet intensity belied the fire within him. Before Mrs. Caldwell, I thought being smart was something you were born with. Or not, he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. She showed me that intelligence is built, one problem at a time, one question at a time. She made me believe I could become something more. The ripple effects of Ruth's work spread far beyond the Learning Center. Across Edgewater, test scores climbed by an astonishing 27%, a statistic that spoke to the collective effort of a community inspired to rise. The high school graduation rate, once among the lowest in Texas, now surpassed the state average, a quiet triumph that filled Ruth with pride she rarely voiced. Families who could have left for wealthier neighborhoods chose to stay, their faith in Edgewater's transformation unwavering. Ruth, ever humble, deflected praise with a wave of her hand. All I did was show up, she'd say, her eyes twinkling with mischief. The children and their families did the real work. But Samuel King, who visited every few months and kept in close touch with his former teacher, saw through her modesty. At a gathering of business leaders considering similar educational initiatives, he spoke with quiet conviction. No one talks about the times she turned down television interviews, refusing the spotlight, he said, his voice thick with admiration. No one sees the tears she shed in private when the challenges felt insurmountable. But everyone will remember that because of her, a generation discovered that knowledge is the most beautiful thank you a teacher can receive. On her 72nd birthday, surrounded by students past and present, their faces a mosaic of decades of impact, Ruth stood quietly, her heart full. The room buzzed with laughter and stories, each person carrying a piece of her legacy. When someone asked if she had any regrets, her eyes softened, and she paused, her mind drifting through the years, the late nights grading papers, the moments of doubt, the children whose lives she had touched. Regrets? She said at last, her voice steady but warm. I've spent my life doing what I love, surrounded by the brightest souls I've ever known. What could I possibly regret? In the twilight of her career, when most would choose the comfort of rest, she chose instead to pour her heart into teaching. The weight of the decision wasn't lost on her. It lingered in her mind, heavy with purpose, as she stood before the question of how to spend her retirement years. She paused, her thoughts weaving through decades of lessons taught, lives touched, and the quiet certainty that had guided her all along. Time moves forward, whether we shape it or let it slip through our fingers, she said at last, her voice steady but warm, like a hearth fire on a winter's night. For me, there's no greater calling than being where I'm needed most, offering what I have to those who need it. Her words weren't just an answer. They were a creed, a testament to a life spent in service to others. As I've traced the contours of Mrs. Caldwell's story, her choices echo in my mind, stirring questions that refuse to fade. How many others like her are out there moving through the world with quiet determination, planting seeds of hope in places the spotlight rarely reaches? In every corner of every town, in the bustling streets of cities, in the stillness of rural hamlets, there are people who see a need and refuse to turn away. They don't wait for an invitation or the perfect moment. They don't seek applause or recognition. Instead, they step into the gap with a simple, resolute, I can help. Day after day, they show up, offering what they have, whether it's a wealth of knowledge, a sliver of time, or an unshakable belief in someone else's potential. Their actions are steady, deliberate, like stones laid carefully to build a path for others to follow. The world we live in thrives on noise, on bold declarations, viral moments, and perfectly curated snapshots that demand attention. Social media amplifies the grand gestures, the ones bathed in golden light and framed for maximum impact. But Mrs. Caldwell's life reminds us that the truest transformations often unfold in the quiet, unnoticed corners of existence. They happen in the dimly lit booths of a McDonald's, where a teacher lingers after hours to explain a math problem. They take root in the hushed conversations in apartment hallways, where a kind word shifts the trajectory of a struggling soul. These moments don't make headlines or trend online, but their ripples spread far beyond what any algorithm could measure. They are the heartbeat of change, steady and uncelebrated. I find myself wondering about the moments we've overlooked, the teachers who stayed late, their desks cluttered with papers, grading long after the school bells fell silent, never expecting a thank you. The neighbors who knocked on an elderly resident's door, bringing groceries or a moment of company, without ever posting about it. The strangers who slipped a few dollars to a cashier to cover someone's bill, unnoticed by cameras or crowds. These acts of kindness, small and fleeting, weave the fabric of lives transformed, yet they rarely leave a trace in the digital world. They don't shift algorithms or spark trends, but they alter destinies in ways that no viral post ever could. If you've been fortunate enough to have someone like Mrs. Caldwell in your life, a teacher, a mentor, a parent, or even a stranger who saw something in you when you couldn't see it yourself, pause today to remember them. Their belief in you, their quiet encouragement left marks on your journey. Their voices, soft but persistent, still echo in your mind when you face challenges, urging you forward. Maybe you never got the chance to thank them properly. Maybe, like Samuel King, you lost touch with them, letting years slip by until the moment for gratitude nearly passed. Or maybe, without realizing it, you're the one playing the role of Ruth Caldwell in someone else's story. You're the one showing up day after day, offering what you can, unaware of the profound impact you're leaving behind. The greatest heroes don't wear capes or stand on stages accepting accolades. They carry worn book bags, their edges frayed from years of use, and sit in fast food restaurants long after their official workday ends. They remember your name when the world has forgotten it, seeing potential where others see only problems. They don't need grand platforms or endless resources to make a difference. What they need, what they embody, is persistence, presence, and the courage to sit beside someone who's struggling and say, let's figure this out together. These are the people who light the way for others, never asking for a spotlight in return. There are countless souls who dedicate their lives to illuminating paths for others, never expecting recognition or reward. Their work is quiet, their impact profound, and their legacy lives in the lives they've touched. If you carry someone like Mrs. Caldwell in your heart, someone whose belief in you shaped who you are, hold their memory close. Their story, woven into yours, is what gives it meaning. And as you move through the world, perhaps you'll find ways to carry their light forward, offering it to someone else who needs it most.